Since 2022, something in Canada has changed. For some, it was a moment of hope. For others, it blurred the lines between government power and individual liberty. But one thing has remained true. Today's guest has been put through the unfortunate consequences and circumstances of one of the most historic protests in Canadian history. February 2022 was the moment Chris Barber went from a trucker just trying to provide for his family to a national icon and true Canadian hero. Today we find out all the details of everything Chris has gone through since the convoy, since trial, from his arrest, his time behind bars in jail, and of course, the most recent hearings around the forfeiture of Big Red, which successfully and fortunately went in Chris's favor, and what's still to come. We are pleased to welcome Canadian hero and legendary Prairie's trucker, Chris Barber.
Screw everything woke. Rise up, I can see your fire. You and me, we can burn what they built to the ground. Burn everything woke. Rise up, can't let them divide us. You and me, we can burn this.
So to those responsible for this behavior, it needs to stop.
No. All right, we are joined now by Chris Barber. You should give him a bunch of titles, a bunch of names, but I think the best name I'd give him is Patriot at this point. So, Chris, I want to go back to the beginning of all of this because there's obviously a journey that you've been through since 2022. I guess would be maybe even before then. But before we get to that, just to give people a bit of a background on your story. When did you start trucking?
When I was 18, I believe I got my license when I was 1992, winter in between Christmas and New Year's. My father and I went and got our Class 1As in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, between Christmas and New Year's. It was a 4-day course back in that day, and I've been trucking for, I believe, 33 years. It's been a while.
And you've been back and forth from, at least what I can see, you've been back and forth across the border and probably all over the country since then.
Yeah, my most of my career I've been long haul, and before I was able to cross the U.S. border, most people know you got to be 21 to drive a commercial vehicle in the United States. So I would do Canadian runs, worked for a neighbor of mine back in that day, and I would do the Alberta deliveries and reloads, and I would bring the truck and trailers back here until I was 21. Then I crossed that border. I started running Texas, doing pipe runs, and just kind of branched off from there. But I've always either been in grain or flatbeds or equipment trailers for the last 30 some years. And in North America, I've been basically all over the lower 48. I haven't been to Alaska yet, but that's on my list.
It'd be nice to get up there. I've heard some horror stories of the roads up there too.
I'll do it in the summertime, is what my theory was. Somebody actually called me here for a load to Anchorage and in the middle of winter with a big, 50,000 pound four-wheel drive tractor. And I kind of thought, as much as I'd love to, not in the wintertime.
Yeah,
That was red.
the summer on that one.
Yeah, I can't chain up with that old girl with the fenders on it. So,
And speaking of that, and we'll get more into Big Red later, but how long have you been running in that one?
I bought Big Red in 2003, November 26, 2003. I've had it for 22 years now. She's got 3.4 million kilometers. I've changed the speedometer a couple times on it, and the engine's obviously been changed. So for accurate kilometers on it, I always guesstimate when I say about 3.4.
Wow. So yeah, you've been everywhere in what is now known as I guess a symbol of hate, as they're putting it.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbols out there, isn't there?
Yeah, apparently. So I mean, when it came to the last few years and when things started to go south, where did the idea kind of start for the convoy? Where did that begin for you?
For me personally, it involved with somebody else reaching out to me on social media saying that, we've had enough of this stuff. We got enough of us out here that have had enough, and then we're at our wits' ends, and it's time to do something. So, typical me fashion, I stopped for my supper in North Dakota that night, January 7th, 2022. And I had a couple drinks with supper, and I come back out and I'm like, I'm in North Dakota right now, and I don't have to wear a mask into a restaurant. I didn't have to show a COVID vaccine passport to eat in that restaurant. People in North Dakota, Minnesota, were living their lives as we used to. And then when you cross that Canadian border, you got to show a new app on your phone to get in, and full restrictions for the better part of 2 years. So I just did a video. I did my part. And that video kind of went viral, brought a few of the truckers into the movement and gave people more to think about. And then as we went from there, we realized that there was a whole bunch of other people that were actually doing the same thing. We're fed up, and it was a grassroots movement. Everybody had a part in it. Everybody kind of had their place, and things went from there. And we all kind of orchestrated this big thing that happened in February 2022.
And so when did Tamara come into the picture at that point? Because you said it was all truckers at first, but where did she come in with that?
Mara reached out to me. I believe I have it actually written in my book here somewhere. I think it was about 10 days after I did that video. So somewhere around January 13th, 14th, somewhere in there. And reached out to me, gave me a call, just introduced herself, said she was fed up of what was going on in the country too, and wanted to be part of it. And at that point, we were kind of thinking we needed somebody to do social media. Tamara was that fit. She's a good organizer, and yeah, that it started from there. So Tamara and I then we found others across the country that were doing the same things, orchestrating or trying to orchestrate something to stand up to the government. And so yeah, Tamara and I were beside each other right from that day forward, and we continued on.
Okay, so then with the planning of it, with everything kind of when you started to get everything set to roll, what was like your go day when it was like, okay, this is the day we're leaving to make this happen?
Oh, I believe it was January. So it was different for everybody, right? We had people in British Columbia, people on the East Coast, Southern Ontario, and it was trying to figure out how to get all those different people moving at different times to ideally meet in the nation's capital. I think it was we rolled in on the January 29th. Things are getting a little fuzzy here. So for us, it was the 24th in Saskatchewan. We rolled out to Medicine Hat and picked up Tamara. I had my son Jonathan with me, of course, Zippy. And then that was our leg in. You got to remember there was so many different organizations and so many different people that were actively involved in this too. It wasn't just Tamara, it wasn't just myself. There was so many other people and organizations that kind of worked with us on that process.
And that's amazing too, because just to see how many people actually came together to make that happen. So as you were coming across Canada, going towards Ottawa, were there any issues that you encountered along the way before you even got there? Obviously, there were issues when you got to Ottawa, but um, anything that stopped you along the way, or anything that was kind of a barrier?
No, no, actually, not. When I got to Medicine Hat and picked Tamara up, we kind of realized that law enforcement was willing to work with us. So we had traffic control basically the entire way across the country. We had RCMP detachments reaching out to us in every jurisdiction, asking how they could help and how to make things safe. Um, and that continued right across Manitoba. We'd help all the way through Winnipeg, obviously Saskatchewan, Regina. Um, the only one that we had troubles was, I guess, Swift Current, my hometown. We phoned for traffic control at some of the intersections there, and notice back from the RCMP was you're on your own, don't break any rules, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I know we've got a lot of support out there with law enforcement, especially in my hometown area here. I spoke to a number of members, so obviously just got a bad cop that day apparently, but Manitoba Ontario border, we had an OPP officer named Marty reach out, and he met us at the scales. If anybody has been on the highway 17 there, you'll know there's a big port of entry scale at the Manitoba border. He met us in that parking lot, and OPP were with us the entire way right to Ottawa.
And see that there's a lot of misconception around law enforcement and whatnot because of everything that happened, and we'll get to that. So when you got to Ottawa, what was the scene like when everyone rolled in?
It was good. We of course staged in Empire. What was the name of the town on the west side of Ottawa? There, Empire, Armpire.
Arm
We
Par, yeah.
staged there. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a little fuzzy in my names. It's been a few years and there's been lots going on the last several years.
Of course.
Yeah, we staged there. We met with law enforcement yet again. They let us in. They had traffic routes and everything planned out for us, an easy way in. Of course, I don't know how many people know this or not. When I was told from people in our group that when we got to Ottawa, we had two major staging areas. Major Hill Parks and Confederation Park were two places where we were allowed to stay. That we the porta potties and everything was set up so we could have a peaceful protest and everything was orchestrated. And of course, when we got in there, that was not the case. You can't park a truck in Major Hill Park or Confederation Park, and I had no idea to that. So we were led in. We realized that some of the people from Convoy were pretty excited about getting in there. And when we got in there, we were not the first ones to enter the city. When we were led in by police, we basically parked Big Red at the Supreme Court. We were parked in the left-hand turning lane into the Supreme Court, and that's pretty much where they parked us. That's as far as we could go.
Mhm.
The city was pretty much full to begin with, so that was an on overwhelmingly emotional welcome. There was people standing on the streets. I believe I still have a video of it on my social media somewhere of us rolling in that day, and it was just overwhelming to see the amount of people standing on Wellington cheering us on as we entered the city.
Mhm. And I mean, obviously, we saw how things progressed and not really a whole lot of government cooperation, at least from what we could see. Um, but were there any conversations with any government officials, near the beginning at all, or was it kind of they shut you out?
Well, the party in power, the Liberals, I guess, nothing. No, they we learned this through the Public Emergency Order Commission in a year from the time that Convoy was split up. That government messaging right from that time was to not acknowledge us. They were going to spin the narrative. They were going to, demean us in the public light, use legacy media against us, and spread a whole bunch of hateful, vile things to turn the Canadian public against us. And to this day, yeah, nothing from the Liberals, nothing but divisive rhetoric.
I mean, yeah, and that's what we continue to see right now. And I mean, how many people when you first started this, how many people were you kind of expecting to show up in the city compared to roughly how many actually showed up?
We had no clue. I left my farm at about 6 o'clock in the morning. I believe it was a Monday morning, the 24th. And talked to many of my trucking buddies, and they're like, "What are you doing? Nobody's gonna do this. And you're just kind of it's not gonna happen." And so I left the home thinking, like, let's just see where it winds up, and come into Swift Current, and we were supposed to schedule to meet at the fuel card lock on the west side of town there. And it was amazing as you come around the corner, it was nothing but a glow of cab lights and lights. Like, there was so many people in that parking lot. All we were doing was running out to the Medicine Hat. We were going the opposite direction of
Yeah.
Ottawa. We are going out to Medicine Hat to pick up Tamara and then meet the West convoy, I guess, as it came in. Um, yeah, how many people did I expect? I had no clue. I know that everyone that phoned me from my trucker buddy groups, that said there's no way this is going to happen. Every single one of them called back and apologized afterwards. Like, we were totally wrong on that one.
And I mean, we heard a lot of I don't know if it's misinformation or just rumors and whatnot around roadblocks and cooperation with the city of Ottawa, because there were some information, maybe it was CBC propaganda, that came out saying you guys were blocking roads and causing destruction. But what was cooperation and communication like with the city and with Ottawa police when you first, like, in the first little while?
Well, communication was always open. I'll make sure people know that communication was always open. The city actually was the one to barricade the city when we were all parked there, and obviously, how many thousands of people stuck out on Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway because there was no more room left in the city, and it was as a big kerfluffle on the account of city management and city law enforcement, not the individual officers. I had no bad interactions with any officers in the city of Ottawa nor the entire country. Everything was extremely professional and peaceful in nature. But the city started blockading us in there. They moved concrete blocks and they moved graders, payloaders, salt trucks, you name it, and basically gridlocked the city around us. So, even if we wanted to, we would have to get permission from people in order to get out of there.
That's crazy. And over the course of, because there was so much footage and so many feeds, whether it was TikTok, whether it was Instagram, Facebook, anywhere, showing everything that was going on in downtown Ottawa for the people who couldn't be there. And obviously, at one point, things went dark. Things went um, more violent, I would say, and not from the convoy side, but from police side. And we saw them come in on horseback and tear gas and starting to take people away. And there was the one lady who was trampled, unfortunately, by a police officer on horseback. Did the goal change at all at that point?
Candace Ciro is her name. She was a Mohawk lady from the Ontario region, an amazing woman. Ran over by horse. There was another gentleman that was run over too. That was actually the police service of Toronto, with the horses that they did that. And where do you think in a proper world did you run a team of horses through a congested protest like that is beyond me. And there's been no level of accountability for that. In the last 5 years is absolutely disgusting. Um, we continue to have a good relationship with law enforcement up until the time close to the Emergencies Act was entered, and then you actually watch the government seek out law enforcement from all across this country. So they flew members from Vancouver City Police, Calgary City Police, all over Ontario. We had the SQ division out of Quebec, which is a riot squad. They shuffled those good officers that knew and probably stood with us. I'm assuming most of them stood with us. They shuffled them back, and they shuffled these new, I don't want to call them goons because that's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
They went out and found the worst of the worst to represent law enforcement through that time. And those were the ones that were brought in. But they also told them, different things too. Like they told them that we were a bunch of, insurrectionists and, horrible people. And I think 90% of the officers there had no idea who they were even coming to fight because the government lied to them. And that's the truth.
So I mean, did the goal change at all at that point, or was it still kind of the same push to maybe get through to government?
Well, we never wanted to see anybody get hurt. I think that was what was one of the primary, reasons for still trying to be vocal, still trying to have the conversation. You got to remember when we traveled that 4,000 kilometers across the country, we heard from countless thousands of Canadians that basically told us, "Don't leave until you get some answers. This is a life or death situation. There's people in this country right now taking their own lives." Because of the government mandates. And so us having that on our shoulders going across the country, and then to have government act the way it did towards peaceful Canadian protesters. I mean, honestly, I think you had to see it out for what it was. The government had to show just how vindictive and evil and how corrupt they would be to squash anyone that dared to challenge their authority.
Yeah, and I mean the the whole, like, I had people here that we were watching everything happening, and there were people here crying when they saw horses coming in, trampling people, tear gassing innocent, peaceful protesters, and it was absurd to even see that. Um, I know one thing I think people want a definitive answer on for sure, though, is going back to Candace. Is she okay? Is she still with us now? Is she still fighting?
The horse actually trampled on her whole upper body, shoulder, broke her collarbone. She dislocated a whole bunch of stuff up inside her upper body there. So last I heard, and I haven't reached out for a little while, I probably should do that. She just had corrective surgery on that here not so long ago, and she was still fighting through it. But just to get run over by those are big horses. I don't know if they were Belgians or what they were. Um, that was a 2,000 pound animal crushing people in a crowd of peaceful protesters. And I can't believe that actually happened. I was, of course, locked up at that time. I was sitting in a jail cell when that all took place, so I wasn't able to witness that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the next part I kind of wanted to get to as well. Is we all saw it happen, you know, and I think it was thanks to your son that was recording that.
Yeah, Jonathan was there. Yeah, Jonathan was there. Joe, Ryan, Dale. There's a few of us that we were kind of patrolling together and worked with law enforcement together. It was our group that we went around and tried to make sure everybody was good. I got a Tim Hortons coffee. It was a couple blocks up from Wellington, just walking down the street, and next thing you know, my hands were taken, arrested, thrown over the police car. And the officers were extremely professional. They weren't aggressive. They were easy to work with. And going forward, getting thrown in the jail cell and in interrogation and all that too. Every officer I dealt with in police custody was absolutely professional and understanding, and just doing their job.
I mean, that was one thing I wanted to ask you because I'm not sure if anyone kind of knew more of that story, but were you did you know ahead of time that, they were gonna come after you and detain you?
We knew it was coming. We didn't know when. Of course, we had meetings with law enforcement and the liaison officer I'd met with that morning that just said, "Listen, you need to get everybody out of here. The time's going to come really soon." And it was the only thing that I should have listened to was leaving my cell phone in the hotel room because that was the one thing that a few people said, to leave your cell phone, and I didn't, of course, I didn't listen to that. So when law
Yeah.
enforcement arrested me, they, of course, took my cell phone, downloaded 4,200 pages of it. Did they find anything? No, no, they tried and they tried to use what they could against me. But in the end, nothing was really usable or that incriminating to me. But what they did manage to do was try and expose that by releasing those 4,200 pages of cell phone evidence to the media on a Thursday afternoon in a courtroom for Tamara's bail hearing. And of course, we couldn't get out there to put a closure on until the following Monday. So
Yeah.
that's some of the vindictive and crazy stuff the Crown's done in the province of Ontario.
And so when you were actually arrested, did they tell you what it was for, or was that kind of when the witch hunt began?
No, I remember being arrested. I don't remember if they read me my Miranda rights in the police station or where it was. It was a big gray area in my head, a little bit of trauma maybe, knowing this was happening. In the terms of it, it was charged with 7 indictable offenses: mischief, intimidation. Um, there was 4 counseling charges on there, intimidation, and the other one was one of the ones that they're actually appealing right now, I believe. For some reason, I can't remember what the third indictable charge was, but
And so, what was it, Jonathan, that recorded your arrest? And
no, it wasn't. It was another guy. I don't
okay.
know if it was Joe or Dale, but Jonathan was standing there. So Jonathan was witnessed. He witnessed the whole thing.
What? How did he take that?
Oh, you could see the emotion bubbling up in his eyes. That's why I said I've told a few other stories like this where that notorious photo of me standing over the police car with a big smile on my face that was trying to calm Jonathan's nerves. I could see him. He had that look in his eyes that scared. Here your father's being thrown in the back of a police car and
Yeah.
you're unsure of everything, and you're in a big city of you know Ottawa. So
Literally the capital of this country going to hell.
yeah,
Um,
where you go to protest your government, right? But
yeah,
when your
really.
government won't listen to you,
Um, so at that point, like what happened when you were actually taken to where were you taken first of all?
Ottawa's police station, the notorious one on Elgin Street, downstairs, 5 by 8 cells. You've got toilet and a slab of concrete to sleep on, no mattress, no pillow, no nothing like that. What I thought maybe, well, it's time to get some sleep and rest up a little bit, but you don't really rest in that place. It's freezing
No.
cold and the lights are on 24 hours a day. You lose track of what time it is. You can't see sunlight, you can't see dark. But you know that you're really hard to find a place to sleep. And then, of course, I was interrogated a couple times where they brought you upstairs into a room and they'd give you a bottle of water through interrogation. But in your jail cell, they wouldn't give you a bottle of water. They'd give you apple juice or orange juice, but they still wouldn't give you a bottle of water. They told you to drink out of the sink. Well, the sink is connected to the toilet in that place, and the water was absolutely disgusting. Yeah, it was a different time, but we did the interrogation. I was, of course, first arrested on the 17th, so I was the first to hit a bail hearing on the Friday. It was a Thursday when I was arrested, and Friday afternoon we had a spot for a bail hearing. And of course, I met the criteria. I had bail bond, I had a way home, I had a surety. Of course, I had conditions. I wasn't allowed to communicate with Tamara Lich and Danny Bulford anymore, and a few others. And that was it. Signed the release, and we left the next day for home in Big Red. It was a
They
long old journey home.
So it was only a day that you were actually
Yeah, 26 hours. Yeah.
okay. So that there was some information that came out that may have hinted at potentially it was longer for some reason. I'm not sure what that was.
Tamara was arrested a few hours after me, or that evening, I guess, on the Thursday. And her bail hearing was pushed off till the Saturday, I believe it was. But Tamara came out to Ottawa with me and she wasn't vaccinated, so she couldn't jump on a plane and fly home. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a way home. She didn't have her husband was there as a surety, of course, but didn't have the bail bond. And then just kind of the way things happened, she was remanded into custody until after the long weekend and the Tuesday. And, I firmly believe that the government got to the judge and said, you need to keep her in here and we're going to
Yeah.
prolong this thing. She spent a stint of like 20 some days in remand in Ottawa. And then, of course, most people don't know the Crown breached her or tried to breach her. Those breach charges accidentally went quietly, disappeared here, a year or so ago, and they dismissed them. But they breached her. They arrested her in Alberta. They had a couple homicide investigators fly all the way out from Ottawa to pick her up and
Jesus.
handcuffed her, shackles, brought her back for another, I believe it was almost 30 days.
This and it's funny because all this is such a sham, right? Obviously. Um, and I just remember laughing at one point. And I think it was probably just before you got arrested because you had put out a video on TikTok, and it really made me laugh through all of the tension because and jog my memory, maybe I have it wrong, but you basically came on and said, if you're out here, if you get arrested, put your hands behind your back, take it like a man.
Yep.
And it made me laugh because it was, all I thought was he's not going to go easy on this one. Like he's not going to let up his point. And I think hopefully it made a lot of people laugh with that.
Well, it gave the true nature. I mean, we were never there for any, abuse or anger or anyone cause anyone harm. We were there for peace. And we knew that the government had to play their hand out to just show Canadians how far they will go to silence anybody that dares to speak against them. So at the end of the day, you take one for the team and you put your hands behind. You don't fight the law enforcement. That's just going to make things worse, and they'll use more against you. I did a TikTok around that same time as the TikTok that you're mentioning, and I just said I had a conversation with my mom today, and I said I think I'm about to be arrested for all the right reasons today. And they used that against me in the court of law. It's like he knew he was going to be arrested. Well, no shit, Sherlock. We were at the world's peacefulest protest in history, and we wanted to be heard, and you sometimes have to take that as far as you have to, I guess.
Okay, so let's go to here, Chris. You're home from Ottawa. You were given conditions on release. Obviously, you can't communicate with Tamara. You can't communicate with anyone else involved. Um, no access to social media either at that point.
No, no, they never did give me anything like that. They did with others for some reason, but I don't know, because maybe I was the first one on the bail hearing that they missed that one. So I'm very thankful for that. Others people involved had huge restrictions, weren't allowed to speak to way more people, and then lost the ability to be on social media too.
So obviously, when you left, you knew at that point this isn't over. This isn't going to end for a while. Were there any communications or instructions, I guess, that you were told that like this is what's next, this is what we're doing, and how this is going to go at all?
As far as like the movement moving forward.
Well, that, and I guess obviously now you have legal trouble that you got to deal with. Like what was the next communication you received from, I guess, law enforcement, lawyers, any of it?
Lawyers. Yeah, it would be lawyers. Obviously I come home and I took a week or so off just to kind of clear my head,
Mhm.
and then I jumped back in the truck and went trucking. But yeah, communication with lawyers all the time. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms was right there with us in Ottawa. Downtown lawyer Diane Magus, who I met during the protest, offered to be my lawyer throughout the criminal proceedings. So of course we were in communication there, and then it's just been yeah, we had to prepare for the POEC, the Public Emergency Order Commission. So there
Mhm.
was, that the commission had to take place within a year of the War Measures Act being invoked, and so that was the next fight, was to try and get orchestrated for that.
At what point did you bring in the JCCF lawyers? Like how far into the convoy did they start getting involved?
So Dr. Francis Christian, who is a renowned pediatric physician in Saskatchewan here, was in good communication with John Carpe and with the Justice Center. And so he was the introduction there. The JCCF was then, they flew 5 lawyers, I believe it was, out to us in Ottawa within the first week or so of the protest. and only two of them remained. The others went back and decided to work from home. So Keith Wilson and Eva Chipiak, who most people know from our online activities there back during convoy, were there to try and guide us in some sort of a resolution with the government. Because obviously, you got to remember, a lot of us there, we just wanted to go protest the government. We didn't
Yeah.
really have the solution for having the conversation or what that conversation would look like or how to take place. And there was different actors involved with convoy that had different ideas. Ours wasn't necessarily to gridlock the city and shut everybody down. It was to protest and have a conversation with the government. Wellington was our primary objective, I guess. Not the residential areas. That was never something that we discussed.
Mhm. So at any point, like after leaving Ottawa and coming home, like was there any communication at all with the federal government, or like any type of interaction at all?
No, nothing. No, they were radio silent on every front. They didn't want to have a conversation with us. They wanted to demean us and make us look as bad as possible, and that was their goal.
And I mean, we saw that the clown in chief, as I like to call him, Mr. Fancy Socks Trudeau at the time, he fled, right? He fled to some unknown location, which we all know was BC. He went to his little cottage, and hid. And but was that frustrating? Because obviously, and I think even from some of us out here in Alberta, it was we just want to talk. We just want a conversation so you guys understand. And there was never any of that.
And there was no intentions of ever having that conversation. Trudeau was a spineless leader. I don't even want to call him a leader because leaders actually lead, and leaders they represent all of the people that they stand, for. And Trudeau only stood for who was obedient to him. That elitistness and that arrogance that he portrays is 100% full. He is literally an arrogant. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And that's the other part too is everything that you went through. Was there a point maybe after you got home and you were kind of going through the court and trial process that you get convicted, you get charged with you said 7 indictable offenses. Was there a point at all where you thought, okay, maybe I could see more time in a prison cell, maybe beyond what you actually got with that 18 months of house arrest?
We're not done that either. Like they've since appealed our sentence, and they've appealed the intimidation charge. No, they're still actively seeking jail. Basically 18 months of house arrest for mischief is unheard of in this country. And,
Yeah.
for anyone that doesn't stand up to the government and not back down, which, I anybody that knows me personally knows that I'm a stubborn guy and I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
I'll be down in the trenches and let's give her a go if we have to. I'm not backing down when I feel that I have a point, and especially when I feel like I've been wrong. So but we're not done this fight by any means. They appealed November, a day before the 30 days mark after our actual sentence was handed down. So
Yeah.
we could see an appeals court in the next 6 months, maybe something like that, and then they will decide in written arguments why we should or why we should not have another trial granted. So if we're deemed to have a retrial, then we will be back in the same battle. Only probably it'll be another 2 years before we see another court for a retrial. So we'll be done our sentences by the time
It comes
anything
back
even
around.
hits. Yeah.
I mean,
And we've thought too, do we fight the sentence? Do we appeal the sentence? The Crown's appealed the sentence. But in our case, would you rather, the courts are never on our side. We've
no.
proven that time and time again. The judges aren't on our side. When you're against the government, the judges, they're not going to go for you. So do you want to serve that sentence right now and just get it over with? Or do you want to, prolong that sentence for another 3 years per se, right? And we decided we'll just keep continuing along.
Yeah, and I mean, when the first, I don't know if it was the first headlines, when it first came out, they didn't mention all of the other indictable offenses, but when they came out with the charge of mischief, my first reaction, I think people in my circles, like the reaction was, that's made up. Like that's a made up charge. Like I've never heard of anyone in Canada, let alone even the US, being charged with mischief where it's almost worth prison time or
Or
any
any
type
type
of
of
jail
jail
time.
time.
the fact is, anything that they threw at us during the course of that trial too, we were convicted because of somebody's speech that they gave in Coutts, Alberta. Coutts and Ottawa, obviously two passionate places to be
Yeah.
and passionate people, but Coutts didn't have anything to do with Ottawa. They were separate protests. Same with Windsor. I mean, they were all Canadians standing up to the government, but they didn't really have anything to do with Ottawa. We were a totally different circumstance there.
Mhm.
They nailed us with traffic violations and parking tickets, and they've turned that into an indictable offense when mischief is normally known as a misdemeanor. And
That's
that's
the
just
thing
a
about
sad
it.
reality of, yeah.
And you mentioned Coots. Like I was down at the Coots one when that happened, and there's a whole other story there because there was 4 or 5 men that ended up getting arrested on complete sham charges there. One of them I think is still.
Tony, yeah, Tony's still locked up in Drumheller right now. Chris Carbert's obviously out on bail, and Jerry and the other Chris are still fighting their way through it. They're through it now because they took the deals obviously and got out. But I mean, for what those poor guys went through
Yeah.
over the course of 4 years is absolutely unbelievable in Canadian justice system today that this is possible, but it is possible under this government.
And so more recently too, they're not just going after you at this point. They're going after your livelihood because they went after Big Red, right? They went after what I think people on the right side of history see as a symbol of freedom and a symbol of a time when um, Canada stepped up for once, and the only time I think it's happened. They tried to take your truck from you. What did they give you a reason why, or did they submit a reason to the courts, a legitimate reason anyway? That it's like we need to destroy the truck.
Because it's a symbol of a movement that embarrassed them. Yeah, they did in their court documents. They actually said that they felt like it was a symbol and it needed to be destroyed to deter others from doing anything against them. The last time in world history was, China when Mao. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Communist dictatorship. That's where we are right now in Canada. It's just
Exactly.
it's so pathetic that there's so many asleep in this country that can't actually open their eyes to this right now. I look at the hate online and I see these people saying, we can't wait till they make that into a pop, a pop can. And I'm like, this is my livelihood. And we all stood up for you because we stood up in 2020, 22. The government backed off on their mandatory vaccinations and boosters every 6 months. They backed off on the interprovincial check stops that they were setting up for travel. That was already happening in some places in the provinces. And I believe that we had a big reality in stopping a lot of that tyranny.
Oh, 100%. The whole movement did, and I mean they'll never admit to that. They'll always say it was their own doing, right? Um, but with the forfeiture hearing, and obviously we got good news out of that you get to keep Big Red. But how's your family handling everything? Publicity and constant media pressure and hate, and you know the way things happen now. Like how are they responding to everything?
Oh, we've got a solid family unit at home here. My wife's not much for social media at all or the attention, so we just kind of she's just likes to be by.
Yeah.
If you're on your phone, Chris, she's upstairs right now. She will gladly be there. I can't get her to be involved with me when it comes to anything for standing on a stage, and I don't blame her. There's a lot of pressure involved with that. My
Yeah.
parents obviously are my closest neighbor. Living on the farm that I was born and raised at. I live on the farm that my dad was born and raised on when he was a child. So we're a tight family unit. We're in this together. We got a lot of community support around us. It's amazing to see the amount of support we have around us. Everybody in the community is here. But just it's a new way of life, I guess, knowing that there's more than once I've turned the computer on in the basement here and my mug's been plastered all over MSN. And yes, I do have that on my screensavers because I don't know how to change it.
And that's a funny one too. I mean, it's a good reminder of the purpose you've served at this point. And I don't know if I can speak for you necessarily for anyone else, but I know when some of us first started posting online, when this whole narrative changed in Canada, it's like we didn't want this. We didn't want things to go this way. It never. We didn't want to be putting our faces out there and having to speak up. We never thought we would have to, but it puts people in a certain position when the government starts to go after innocent people and take away your freedom, your rights, everything, and all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm speaking up, and you were the voice of that really before anyone else.
One of the many. I got to be really careful to make sure that I make sure that people get the credit where it gets due. Was, I yelled at the steering wheel for 2 years previous to this. I trucked on empty highways. I mean, I stood in drive-through lineups at McDonald's and Tim Hortons to get my morning cup of coffee because you can't take a semi through the drive-through, obviously, and you can't go into the restaurant to get a coffee. So we were limited to just standing in between vehicles at the drive-through thing and ordering over the speaker and then walking up. Those are some of the things we had to endure. Eating cans of soup out of the truck all the time. Your bathroom was outside. I did what I did, and I did it for the better of my business and my family and paying my bills. I kept trucking all the way through it. My daughter went through segregation in high school. She was unvaccinated. She was bullied and by other fellow classmates. Calling her a plague rat, and I remember she was in band. She was really active in band class, and she had to play the clarinet in a separate room from the rest of her bandmates because she was unvaccinated. And eventually she gave into that peer pressure and got vaccinated. My son, he did a whole big double finger salute to the government, and everything stood right there. To this day, this kid is, he gets the
Tough as
flu
nails.
once a year. Yeah. He's still standing tall. My parents, another one, I used to have really, good conversations with my father right through the middle of the pandemic, like you should just get vaccinated. We can all get through this. This is the way forward. We want things to return to normal. Then my 68-year-old father at that time got the booster and his gallbladder quit working. And it was 6, 7 months of him losing a lot of body mass, a lot of weight, 68 years old, and you don't really have that kind of weight that you can just kind of throw away. It never comes back. And so by the time the doctors found out that his gallbladder was failed and did the surgery on him, he remembers lying on the gurney there for the operation, and the doctor saying, "Let me guess, you got your booster." And Dad said, "Yeah, why?" He says, "I do these all day long. This is something that I think is, something to do with the end of the jab."
Yeah.
And Dad, he's become a little more frailer in the last number of years, but he's
Mhm.
still woke him up huge, and he's been right there with us the entire time. So,
But I mean, of course, if the doctors actually speak out against this, they lose their jobs. We've seen.
Dr. Francis Christian is a prime example of that, actually speaking out about, vaccinating young, healthy children about this thing when it's unproven and untested. And, he loses his license, and he is basically ridiculed and shut down in the medical community. And to this day, he still has not had, any accountability for the actions caused towards him.
Yeah, and just even going back to the beginning of all of this, what sparked everything. Like I was telling you before we even started recording, I lived in Ontario at the time, and my family was not very awake to the real situation at the time, but they quickly started to tune in because I would go into a grocery store not wearing a mask, not causing problems, like doing my own thing, ignoring everyone else, not caring. I don't care if anyone wears a mask. That's their choice. It doesn't bother me. But I'd have people yelling at me, screaming in my face, and then all of a sudden I get kicked out. And I remember I was with my mom one time, and she even said, "What was that about? You didn't do anything." Well, yeah, and that was the case for how many of us? And so coming out to Alberta, where freedom still reigns, at least to a certain extent, um, and obviously in Saskatchewan too, like the mentality changes east to west. And I think we've seen that. And that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about too, because I've heard recently your mentality has changed about Canada and the future, and you've been kind of moving more towards the independent side of things. Um, so with that, because I don't know where it was said, but you had mentioned something about being involved with the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been asked to assist Brad and the growth of, or the conversation. What I think needs to happen right now is a conversation, and we have to ask: is Canada working right now? When you look at the equalization payments that are announced between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the East, basically it's been that cow milk mentality for how many years here, and we can't
mhm,
continue to go on. The show, Canada just announced another $2.5 billion to Ukraine now.
mhm,
While we have Canadians that can't afford groceries right now or rent in this country, the
yeah,
priorities of Ottawa are not what the priorities of the West has anymore. And I believe this is a sentiment all the way across Canada, but this conversation needs to happen now. If only we could just divorce ourselves from Ottawa, because the bureaucrats and the disgusting corruption that inhabits that city. I mean, all you have to do is look at the city symbol. It says it all right there. It's
yeah,
basically a demonic symbol, 666. that's our nation's capital, and that's where we see all this filth and disgust and corruption going on in this country right now. It's time to actively think about our children's future right now. And Ottawa doesn't. It's like they have an open checkbook and they're spending whatever the hell they want with no
Yeah.
accountability. And I think somebody has to rein them in and hold them accountable for that.
So I mean, where did that change for you? Because obviously, we all saw you as the patriotic Canadian, love this country, was willing to stand up for it. But now that you're moving towards the independence, like where did that mentality shift? Like where did you decide like, no, I'm not that guy anymore?
I've seen it over the last number of years, and it's been sad to say that I've seen it because I've seen the best in Canada. But I've also seen the negative of Canada too. I've seen the people out there that attack me. I've had death threats because of my political stance or because
Yeah.
of me calling out the government on there. Um, this has gone too far. The entitlement in this country has gone way too far, and I don't see a path forward now. Watching the APP and being to a couple Alberta Prosperity, town halls and listening to that, when you listen to them lay out the roadmap for how this country is never going to work because of the policies of
Yeah.
of Ottawa. What other thing? When you're in an unhealthy relationship, do you stay in it, getting a black eye every couple nights, or do you
Yeah.
find a way to move on? And like this is the sad part of it. We're never going to fix this. The East will always decide how the country votes before our ballots are even counted in the West. It's unfair. It's always been unfair. I mean, if you go back years ago when Alberta, Saskatchewan were known as the Buffalo Territory, they
Mhm.
didn't want us. They didn't want us.
No.
And to turn that thing around too, if it was to say, if the Buffalo provinces were still here and Canada was saying, hey, would you guys like to join Confederation? What could they offer us right now that would be a tempting solution to say, hey, that's a good idea. We should join Canada? Nothing. Not absolutely nothing. There's nothing there anymore. Free healthcare. There's a man in Edmonton, Alberta that just died in the waiting room the other night
Yes.
because of the healthcare system. And you see people blaming, political figures for that. That's not it. It's the way the system is, and it's the way Ottawa is designed. The unions have destroyed, I get a little bit of trouble when I say this, but the unions have basically destroyed a lot in this country. When they
Yeah.
had their purpose back in the day, they have basically, I've seen it personally, and I know I'll take slack for that, and I'm a guy that likes to take slack.
Yeah, I think you join a large group of us that do constantly. Um, and the biggest message I get, and it doesn't necessarily piss me off, but it makes me laugh a little bit because all the liberal Canadians, the ones who are still well asleep, the response I get, whether I'm posting videos on TikTok, YouTube, anywhere, the response is, well, if you hate this country so much, why don't you just move across the border to Trump land? What would be your response to people with that? Because obviously America is still the land of the free.
It is to a certain extent, but yeah, no, I didn't change. Canada changed.
Mhm.
So for me to leave the country that I've been born and raised in and was happy, this country has adapted to the woke left and the ideologies that just don't fit our values anymore. I didn't change, and I just assure people of that I'm still, blue collar. My hands are dirty 90% of the time, even though I wash them. I'm constantly busy. I'm trying to improve life for my family, working, and community. And it's not me that changed. It's this country.
It definitely isn't. I wanted to go back to just one thing, and I was trying to avoid it at first, but I think answers need to come out on this. I've always believed money is the root of all evil, but obviously there was the GoFundMe during the convoy and the Give Send Go. Um, that money, from what I've heard, has disappeared. Do you know what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all public knowledge. So there was $1 million released for the GoFundMe, of course, before GoFundMe tore it down, and GoFundMe was actually going to put the other $8-9 million into the charity of their choice. And through public pressure from us, we forced GoFundMe to actually give the money back to the donors. There was $1 million that hit a bank account. Tamara, myself, we had access to that bank account. It was immediately frozen. There was the e-transfers that came in, the same thing. There was probably about 400,000 in e-transfers. All of this is available online, by the way. The Public
Yep.
Emergency Order Commission had a website, and it detailed everything. We were forensically audited 16 different ways to Sunday. If the government or any of the organizations out there wanted to use anything against us that they found in a negative light, they would have.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So the Give Send Go obviously was then announced after the GoFundMe failed. Keep in mind, we still have that $1.4 million in the bank account that's frozen. by the Ontario courts. The institutions in Canada were just as corrupt as the government.
Yeah.
The Give Send Go, Jacob Wells was able to hit the refund button on just about everything in that. What was missing was about $3.5 million in the Canadian company called Stripe, which I believe Mark Carney had something to do with at the time, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so all in all, we didn't know that until the Public Emergency Order Commission. There's this 3.5 million trapped in this Canadian company Stripe until later on. So as it stands right now, there's approximately $5.5 million sitting in an escrow account in the Ontario courts right now, left over from Convoy. Those were Canadian people that donated to the betterment of their own country. It was frozen by the government. There is 4 levels of freezing on that right now between the Ottawa Attorney General's office, the Ontario courts. There's I can't remember the other one. And then, of course, there's the lawsuit from downtown lawyer Paul Champ and lead plaintiff Zexi Lee, the lady that worked for the Revenue Canada division. She's been filed a $300 million lawsuit against Freedom Convoy organizers like myself, Tamara, Lich, and others. That is slated for certification in early part of 2026, I believe. So we're coming up on that here fairly quick. Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see that. The government will eat away at that and use it for what they want. Maybe they'll give it to Ukraine. Who knows?
Probably. And I mean, that 2.5 that was just donated there, maybe that's where that came from. Was from that account. But with that freezing, with that freezing, is there any way for that to be reversed? Like, do you know if they did hint at all at getting that back to you or to the people who donated, or are they just going to keep that and give another middle finger to Canada?
It's a legal battle, and it's one, once we bat out the class action lawsuit, if that's ever batted out, then we have to fight the next level of freezing on top of that too. So, well, first of all, too, like, it's not my money, it's not Tamara's money. There was an accountant that was involved with this right from the start that kind of had the mindset to start a not for profit up, and he called it Freedom Corp, something like that. And that was set up to have a place for that money to go. So nothing was in a personal bank account. And then, of course, being a board of directors for that not for profit, we're not allowed to touch any of that. That's got to, we're to direct that money, but we're not to take any of it. So
Yeah.
we had all these ideas back in the day, obviously covering the truckers' fuel costs and expenses. The government put a big squash on that right from day one. That money's still sitting there for that. I don't even know. I believe there's still records around to this day in other people's hands, of course, that they to account for travel expenses and all that. The other option was to send it off and to veterans associations across the country, because the vets stood with us in Ottawa too. They were a huge force. They were right there with us. Indigenous communities too. There was a lot of different places that money was destined, but of course the government had different ideas on that. So if we ever see, it could be, we're already almost 5 years into this thing. The lawyer said you'll be locked up for about 10 years in total through the legal battles. So
That's absolutely insane. And I mean, how does that work for you with working now? Because obviously there's conditions to work, and um, does anything change for you with work, or is it still just day in, day out, same old, same old?
that's been the biggest struggle, I guess, I've had in the last 3 months of this being under house arrest. I'm allowed to be in my yard. I'm allowed to go out to the shop or the barns to feed the horses. I'm allowed to go up to my parents and clean the yard out with snow if we get a lot of snow, which is something that's on my list for this afternoon, because we did get a lot of snow yesterday. Everything that I do has to be scheduled out. So probation officer, Mondays, Wednesdays, we email back and forth over what the schedule looks like. Tomorrow, 2 possibilities: I'll either be going to Montana with a combine, or I'll be going up to Grand Prairie, actually, with a 4-wheel drive tractor. So I just have to pencil everything out. It has to be on a schedule. So when I say I'm going to be home by 10 o'clock at night, I have to be home at 10 o'clock at night. If I'm going to be late on that, if I'm caught in a storm or that, I have to phone the local detachment of the RCMP and just explain the situations and why I'm going to be late. Everybody's been super easy to deal with at the local detachments there every time I've had to call. So just, making sure that you don't slip up in any way so they can nail you and breach you, because I would have to go to the jail for the remainder of the sentence. So playing by the rules right now is imperative.
Yeah, and we encourage you obviously to keep doing that. Um, but Chris, thank you for all this information. Hopefully, maybe by the time this whole thing does start to wrap up, we can maybe do a follow up to see where you're at, and see if anything is improving, changing, or maybe at the point that Alberta and Saskatchewan have decided to join together and leave. We'll see if that becomes a thing.
It's a long old road. Yeah, I'm readily available. Like I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of rumors, and I know there's a lot of stories out there, and people make rumors up and lies as it seems like the days go on. So if anybody has any questions on that, like just reach out. As long as you do it in a peaceful and and not an ignorant and come across as angry, I will answer any question out there. I have nothing to hide as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing because we're all over social media everywhere, easily accessible. Whether it's through the podcast, we have emails, we got our own social medias. Everyone knows where to find me here in Alberta. I mean, I don't exactly hide it. The only one that probably is coming after me at this point is probably the government. But take it like a man if it happens.
Hey, we just got to stand. That's the thing that everybody needs to remember. When enough of us stand, they'll listen.
And maybe this needs to happen round 2 at some point if they still refuse to listen to us. But anyway, I know you've got places to be, Chris. So thank you so much today, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks so much.
Well, Canada, now you've heard it all. Pretty sad what this country has become, I'd say. But I'll leave it up to you to decide. Does the status quo continue? Or are you going to stand up and finally fight for change? If you'd like to help this show stay on, keep the lights on, keep us moving, feel free to go to our merch shop and grab the smallest item even, whether it's a mug, t-shirt, you name it, it's all there. Would be much appreciated. Thank you once again to Chris Barber for joining us today, and we'll see you soon with another episode.
Hey truckers, I wear a hat and sing for a living. Canadian country singer Paul Brandt here. I've been listening with my wife and 2 kids, and we want to say thank you for all you're doing in defense of civil liberties and freedom. You're inspiring the world, and we're standing with you. Breaker 19, this here's a rubber duck. You got a copy on me, Pigpen? Come on. Yeah, 10-4, Pigpen, for sure, for sure. By golly, it's clean clear to Flagtown. Come on. Hey, it's a big 10-4 there, Pigpen. Yeah, we definitely got the front door, good buddy. Mercy sakes alive, looks like we got us a country boy.